work with a lot of apartment complexes. We work with a lot of, we connect with a lot of elderly complexes that are subsidized on their own. So they call us, they say, we have vacancy. If you get an elderly person that you can't serve, send them our way because maybe we can serve them. So we try to make those connections that if we can't serve you, we do try to find someone that can. You guys are just raking me over the
reliable workers there that do all this every day?
Say that again?
Do you really have reliable workers in your force that do this every day? That
I do, and I will share with you that when I arrived in 2012, we had a staff, we had a lot of temp staff because of the nature of our funding. So I did a lot of work to rebuild the staff. Some of the temps I hired, some I got rid of. So we had about 20 temporary employees when I arrived. We now only have 4. So we've hired and I've increased the staff by 10 over the last 3.5 years. So we're now, and the last time they have been trained was in 1997. We train them on a continual basis. We retrained everyone that immediately in 2013. We have continual training. I'm a national trainer for housing on the national level, so I travel around the country, train individuals on housing. My program manager is a national trainer, so we use that resource to train our staff to make sure that they stay up. Every time HUD releases anything about anything, we get the notice. We're in tune with all of those organizations. I am the president of the Maryland Association of Housing, so I know what's going on in every jurisdiction. I know what's going on in every housing authority, so I'm following the trends. I make sure my staff is following the trends. So we are a different housing office than we were 4 years ago.
You said you could go across the country as your model?
Our FSS program is being looked at to go across the country as the model for family self-sufficiency. I travel to train. When there's a training or when another housing authority says, who can we get to train our staff? Typically either myself or my program manager is the first name that pops to their head. So we're known across the country as experts in housing. So that is why if you can come and visit our office. We are definitely a different housing office, and Mike, have you seen the difference in the office?
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. I actually sit on the Human Relations Commission, so that's where I get to see a lot of it. And as far as doing a wonderful job. And
so I would say this: Rome wasn't built in a day. No. We are always going to have participants in our program that are going to try to skirt the system and try to not do the right thing. Like I said, we do our due diligence to try to identify those individuals, and with the help of the landlords in the community, we usually do weed them out. I go around to all the community meetings all the time and talk about what's going on. A lot of the community presidents contact me directly, and we have correspondence about what their community can do to make things better for the community. Again, I can't disclose who the clients are or whatever, but we work hand in hand. And again, I deal with people on my waiting list, trying to find them housing because I can't house them, and I also deal with my participants. So it doesn't help us not to help them.
Where did we get the word Section 8? Where did we get that?
That is the section of the CFR where the regulation is located.
Why do they feel like it's so mean? Why?
Well, you'll find that a lot of government programs are named after the section of the federal regulation.
But now it's sustainable housing.
Right. There's no question.
Is it all the time? Is HUD separate, or is it
Sustainable.
Section 8 and HUD? Are they both the same thing, or are they two different things?
So HUD, Housing and Urban Development, governs the Section 8 or Housing Choice Voucher Program.
But it's both the same thing?
They're the entity that governs the program. It's a program underneath of them, as same as FHA and all the other housing programs are under the HUD umbrella.
Okay, then I have another question. Like, in our communities, in our community, We have a house across the street from us, it's been vacant for, I'm guessing, I don't know, 5, 7 years. I think they foreclosed and it went to the bank. And neighbors said it's a HUD house. Now, whether it is or not, I don't know that. But
Yeah, I guess I'll check it.
why do the houses sit vacant for so long?
So if they're, and again, I'm just assuming, so I don't know the situation with this
I know,
house.
and I really.
Typically, when someone refers to it as a HUD house, that means HUD has foreclosed, HUD is now the owner of it. So guess what?
HUD has bought it.
HUD is no different than Joe Blow that owns the house. If they are not maintaining the house, you need to call HUD and say what's going on with this house, but you need to maintain it. They are still the owner. As far as the concern, you can call code enforcement on them, you can do all the same things.
Oh, we do.
Right, so they're now the owner, they are still under the same obligations as any other homeowner in that community. Just because it's a HUD house doesn't mean that they get to neglect it.
But a lot of times they seem to sit vacant for so long.
And I can't speak to their processes for dealing with those types of homes, but from a community perspective, they're the owner, deal with the owner.
I can talk a little bit about that. Normally what happens is one of these houses goes into foreclosure, okay? And the bank is holding the house, okay? The bank does not notify the county council, which that's what they should do. But they don't do it. That law has to be changed in Baltimore County, that the banks notify the county council or the county government that the bank now owns it. That way, in case the grass needs to be cut, they can do it. Then what ends up happening is, then the house, if the bank decides to go and sell that house, they auction it off on the courthouse steps. In the meantime, none of the neighbors know what is going on. You know, I mean, they're not notified that this house is going up for auction because they might want to sell it to their family members, or they might want to buy it to somebody, you know, somebody in their family. So, in the meantime, nobody knows this house is going up on the courthouse steps. So what happens is, the people from HUD are there, they buy the house for whatever the price it is, a higher price, then they turn around and sell it for a lower price.
Well, in answer to that question there, I used to provide everybody here the list within our group
Yes.
of the houses that were going to be auctioned off and those that have been recently sold. You can get this information in the Jeffersonian,
Yeah, but I'm not.
and the
everybody gets
Jeffersonian comes out Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I get it.
Yeah.
So I see what's going on with the houses, and I'm always looking at our zip codes to see who's being auctioned off or whatever, and also what the properties are sold for. If I can find some more time in my day, I can start up that list again and let you know each month what I went down as to when the auction dates are.
Because we could have actually, in my neighborhood, it was kind of sad because I had a neighbor that her husband was very ill. And her son wanted to buy a house. He had $25,000. This kid's 22 years old, saved from working. He wanted to buy this one home, and what happened was, we were waiting for it to go up, you know, for sale. We didn't know anything about it. It went up on auction. He had to go out and actually buy a house down the street from where his father lived, or stepfather lived, where he could have lived next door to help him out. He had to buy one and pay twice the amount of money, because he did not know that.
The two things you gotta keep in mind is the contract, the actual mortgage, and what it stipulates. If the mortgage stipulates, if they default, that it's sold at public auction, that's the only thing, once the bank takes possession, that's the only thing that can happen with it. The other thing is, you gotta keep in mind the property values. There are a lot of properties sitting out there that the banks have taken possession of, that they're just sitting on and they're not selling. Because, say there was $100,000 owed on the mortgage, but now because the way the economy's tanked, the property's only worth $75,000.
Yeah,
They
well-
know they're not gonna be able to get their money out of it, so they're gonna sit and hold it, hoping property values go back up and they'll get their money.
Well,
but then the house deteriorates.
well,
But a
no,
lot of times, but the land,
One across the street.
but if the property's in the area, if you end up with no land in the area, then that land price goes up,
well, let me
and they can get their money.
let me
So do you
explain.
have any other questions of me? Because I can't address any of that.
I wanted to answer her question.
Okay, I just want to do a quick synopsis of what you said, so that I make sure, since I got here late, and I apologize for that. Section 8 vouchers, which are no longer called Section 8 vouchers,
Correct.
are the main problem, from what I've heard from you tonight, is the landlord. The
It's,
landlord,
I won't say that the main problem is, one of the problems is the cooperation of the landlord as it relates to communicating with us and also enforcing their lease with the tenant. That you will find with any community, the landlord drives the resolution to the problem. They're not the main problem. I won't put that label on our landlords.
well, the reason I say that is because I know for a fact that about 15 years ago, some guy went into West Inverness and he bought up 56 homes. And, wonderful, he can afford to do that. But a lot of the homes that he purchased in West Inverness, he ended up renting out to Section 8 housing. And it created a tremendous amount of problems in that community. Property values went down, neighborhood went down, and it's really never rebounded from that.
That's a landlord problem.
Right, and the other thing too that when you said about landlords not maintaining their property, it doesn't necessarily mean, as you said earlier, that a rental on Pinewood Road, where I live, might not be a Section 8 house. It could be an absentee landlord who lives up in New York, who doesn't care about that property because he doesn't live there.
That is
All
correct.
right, so if that is not a Section 8 landlord, how does a community association go about finding out who the landlord is to that home? Especially if that
Well,
house is.
there's a couple of ways. There's a couple of ways. One, you can find out how the deed was recorded, who owns the house. That's one way. The other way is ask the people that are living there, who's your landlord?
What
If
if
they
it's
choose to
empty?
share that with you,
What if
and if
it's
it's empty, then you have to go the route of the property search and find out
SDAT.
who's the registered owner. And again, if the house is becoming in a state of disrepair to the point that it is violating Baltimore County Code, call code enforcement. They only respond to complaints. They're not gonna drive up and down the street and say, oh, that house looks a mess, let me write a citation. They will respond if you call and complain about a property. They will come out, they will write a citation if necessary, and if they have to come back, if they give them a prescribed amount of time to repair it. If it's not repaired, and they go back, and then it starts the court process. The fine keeps going up and up. You can stay in New York, Mr. Landlord, if you want, but you're gonna owe Baltimore County some money. So again, the community has to initiate that. You see a house that's going into disrepair to the point that it's violating Baltimore County Code, make that phone call. They will respond to your complaint.
Well, I've done that in the past. but-
And then,
You have to continue to do it.
And then
I have a house around the corner from me. You know, it was just, they looked like reporters lived there. The backyard, you couldn't, the stuff was coming out of the driveway, everything, it was a mess. The neighborhood, we continued to call and call and call. They ended up with 18 citations. They eventually cleaned it up because the county was getting ready to take further action. Now the house is, all the code violations have been fixed. It's still a little ugly. There's no code broadly, but the code violations have been repaired, and the house is in a better state than it was because we were unrelenting about making sure that it at least adhered to Baltimore County Code.
Wayne, you had a question?
My question, under the new law, and I'm sitting here listening to this, trying to figure it out, but you said the average rent from 817, people wanting to move to opportunity elsewhere, if there is no property with a rent that low.
So remember, that's an average of all 5,700 vouchers on the program. So-
Well, but I'm using a basic figure, and that's it. So my question is,
That average rent is probably gonna go up.
They take 2 or 3.
Is more than likely going to increase because the rents in those opportunity areas are higher. So we're going to be paying market rent and probably up to 120% in some areas because of the market rents in those areas. So we will be able to assist less
The
clients.
reason I sort of bring this up, it's been the natural order of segregation of how to keep people from different communities.
Correct.
So now you're saying this new law will mandate that they will be able to go to those gatherings.
Correct.
Here's,
And which is also the basis of, it is the article that's in your packet talks about the Thompson decree that happened in Baltimore City. Again, that was the basis of that complaint, was that neighborhoods and landlords were allowed to lock people out of certain areas of the city and also of the county. So this is really a continuation of that. Baltimore County is committed to not have that happen within Baltimore County's boundaries. And we're gonna work really hard over the next 10 years to make sure that there's affordable housing spread out within the county boundaries.
I guess the question is, in changing government officials can change that?
Nope, we're locked into this agreement for 10 years.
For how many years?
It's gotta happen. If it doesn't happen, then there's another set of protocols that HUD will be, I'm sure, more than likely happy to implement. But it's the right thing to do for Baltimore County, as you saw in the article. Kevin Cabinets is very much behind it. So
I can say it was the right thing, I'm just trying to figure out,
Right, we're gonna
to
do
make
it.
it implement, to make it happen will surprise me, because
So this is,
politically-
so let me just let you know, so HUD makes these mandates and they drive these complaints, but they're also involved in, because they're providing the funding, so we can't get it done unless the funding changes. There was just a notification that came out today where they realized we're gonna be paying higher rent, so they're working on additional funding. They're going to Congress and say, housing authorities need more money in order to correct these fair housing violations. Right at this moment, this point in time, I don't have it, so I gotta do it with what I have. Hopefully, over the next 10 years, the light bulb will go on for them, and we will get that additional funding. When I got there in 2012, we only had $48 million. We're now at $59 million. So does it happen? Yes. Do I beat down the doors and say, I need more money, I need more money? Yes. So we've got to make it happen. It's the right thing to do, and we're going to continue to go with funding. The county has ponied up a significant amount of money to make sure that it can happen. So the county's working while we try to work with HUD to get some additional money from them also, and additional vouchers from them to implement the program.
well, the part of this question, then we'll go back to maybe some of the earlier statements. How much can the federal government tax an individual to pay for people?
I can't answer that.
But you gotta understand, when you tell us that people can stay on this voucher program indefinitely, there's no motive.
for them to go to work.
There's no motive for them to go to work.
Generations.
Yeah.
So, you're correct. There are some generational families on the assistance, but there are also a lot of individuals that are not. You can't make the blanket statement that everyone on the voucher program. Right, so what I'm saying to you is that that's the federal government regulation. I can't change it, Baltimore County government can't change it. That's the federal regulation as it applies to this program. But you also have to take the human factor into it, that there are a significant number of our families that don't want the assistance. They just need a little boost. Somebody lost their job, somebody became ill, whatever. We get a significant number of vouchers voluntarily returned to our office.
And my point is, as a Christian, I believe in helping people, but once you help people, people have to help themselves. And if you have generations of people that won't help themselves because the government hands it out instead of demanding something for it. And I know you didn't make that problem, it's a federal problem.
And there's nothing I can do about that. I cannot take their voucher away because
No, I didn't say take it away,
I can't even have the conversation with them, nor would I. But that's an argument that you have with your council people, with your state legislation,
senators.
and your senators, if you feel strongly that that law should change. I'm just here to implement the law as it is.
I believe wholeheartedly in helping someone. But how much help do you give to one that it's no longer help, but it's just a way of life?
It's expected.
They expect it.
Well, I can't.
And the program that they have, a
I'm just
5-year
looking
program,
at,
that participation is up. If you go from
Correct.
50
It
to
is
400.
significantly.
I'm thinking about the rights of the landlord.
Okay.
Does the landlord have to have
follow a blanket, lease that, is given by Baltimore County, or can they write their lease
We
with
do
their
not-
conditions?
Yes, we do not give any lease. We
And
don't
that's
give
in
any,
the new law?
and we don't give any, it's never
Mhm.
been, the Baltimore County Office of Housing will never give you advice on a lease. We will never write a lease for you. You, as long as your lease adheres to Maryland law,
Okay,
we accept it.
right.
All we ask is that you adhere to it, and also that your lease does not discriminate in any way to the tenant, and it allows peaceful enjoyment of the property. So we have no involvement, other than we have a copy of the lease, because if it becomes an issue with that client as far as eviction or whatever, we can say, your lease said X, Y, Z, you didn't, the landlord said you didn't adhere to it, we have a copy of it, so it's not a he said, she said, this is what your lease said, you didn't do it, and we deal with it there, but we do not have any input on any lease for any landlord.
Because I think you probably have a lot more success with landlords if they understood that. A lot of landlords don't.
They do, we tell them that,
They
but
know that they
again,
overlook it.
yeah.
Because they want the money.
Yep.
They want the money, they want.
So just like, and we can't do too much about that, other than if we do kick landlords off the program. If we find that they are not keeping their properties up to par, and we're constant, if they go into abatement, which means we've gone into the property, it doesn't meet quality standards, we stop paying them. If they don't fix it in 30 days, and then we give them another 30 days, if we've done this with you on several occasions, you're no longer a landlord on our program. We're not gonna keep playing with you because you just want the money, and that's not what we're in the business to do.
I have a question. Somebody that I know is on Section 8, and they're having a problem with getting her rent has gone up. She tried to talk to her caseworker. She calls her caseworker, called her 4 or 5 times, caseworker never returns the call. What do you do about that?
She should email me directly, and I will make sure she gets me.
I can tell you she cannot email.
Hmm?
She cannot email.
She can call
But-
me. My number is 410
I'm gonna get your card. I'm gonna get your card.
8969. I accept all calls, and I return all calls, and I answer all emails.
I will get your card. I'll get your card at the end because, I feel really bad for her.
Okay, well, let's see. If you're concerned that a house might be a house that is part of the program, am I able to say, is this house a part of that in my neighborhood?
You can say it, I'm not gonna answer
She
it.
can't.
Okay, so you can't tell me what houses are which.
By federal regulation,
Federal.
so let me just say this, because I love my money, and I love working
She
in the
lost her
world
job.
of
She lost her
housing.
job.
I will become, if I told you that it
She
was,
lost her job.
I will become disbarred, I will never be a
Okay,
part of housing
let's say-
again,
okay,
and
is that-
I will be fined
All right.
or
Okay, well, I
imprisoned.
understand that part now. Okay, is there anywhere that I can go to find out whether or not,
Yeah.
why?
Because
Because of
is because of
confidentiality.
confidentiality under the program. The client signs an agreement between us and the client that we will not disclose anything, not their name, address, none of their family members, nothing about them, to anyone that they do not authorize us to do it.
I have a question. In our community, I have a neighbor. We believe that that house is Section 8. One of the neighbors called me and told me that they now have a problem, and that's, well, we were talking about code enforcement earlier. They're having a birch problem.
Okay.
How would you handle that?
Call code enforcement. Call.
Code enforcement.
However, code enforcement
It doesn't-
cannot go into the house. They cannot make.
So let me just say this, I don't know what the circumstance of the house is. If the occupant of that house is a housing choice voucher participant, one of the violations under housing quality standards is that the house can't be, have an infestation problem. So we will go in, we will inspect. If there's notice of infestation, we give a 30-day notice to the landlord.
But you inspect how often?
We inspect once a year, and we also inspect on complaint.
So who would we complain to?
So,
Code
so
enforcement.
let me just say, code enforcement and housing, the housing inspectors live in the same department,
Okay,
okay? They report under the same structure.
okay.
So if you call code enforcement, they will make the determination that that house is or isn't a Section 8, and they will assign the appropriate inspector. If they need to assign a housing quality standards inspector, that person would come out. If they need to send out a code enforcement inspector, that person will come out. Again, they look the same, you won't know the difference between the two. They all have on code enforcement shirts.
But they are
Wearing
two
the
separate,
badge.
it's two separate though, right?
Correct.
And they got
In the
Baltimore
same-
County, white car.
Thank you.
Correct.
But from a community standpoint, our First Avenue is code
They
enforcement.
do, and so,
Yes.
to your comment, they do drive Baltimore County cars that
And they
the
do wear
Housing
a
Choice
yellow
Voucher
badge.
Program paid for.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not coming out of any Baltimore County tax dollars. Every aspect of the Housing Choice Voucher Program is paid for through the federal dollars. There is no income from Baltimore County
No,
government
but
to
it's
run
coming
that
out of your
program.
pocket anyway, in the long run, but you're just paying it in federal taxes.
Yeah.
I heard that 71 cents out of every federal dollar goes to retirement. Is that?
I can't deny or confirm that.
Yeah, I
know
know
that
that.
is- I don't want to say yes or no, because I don't know that.
Well, this
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's how much we get. Every jurisdiction in Maryland gets a different amount, but depending on their program size. We're the third largest housing choice voucher program in the state of Maryland. We are second to Montgomery County, who's second to Baltimore City, who has the largest housing choice voucher and public housing program in the state of Maryland.
That's a lot of money, Corey.
It is a lot of money, and we don't have enough to do what we need to do, so. Again, I can't address the whole, how they've come out with the tax dollars and all that, I can't address that.
Are we adjourned?
Are we good?
I think what we've all really learned here tonight is that we need to replace the people in Washington DC so that we can get people.
Elect Pat McDonough.
And I think that's.
Well, I thank you for all of your questions, I thank you for